Whenever the Olympics comes around, there's this fascination over what bows we use at the Olympics. And there's equally a large reaction where people want to see the old-fashioned bows, the long bows, the Asiatic bows, and especially the thumb draw techniques, which has seen a bit of a resurgence in recent times, thanks to the availability of resources, printed material, and more people forming communities in real life and online where they can share the passion for a traditional style of archery. So why don't we include a traditional Asiatic archery in the modern Olympic or modern archery programs? So first the question is, can you shoot thumb draw in the Olympics? And this is a nuanced question because the Olympics doesn't decide the rules, World Archery decides the rules. They are the primary affiliate for Olympic Games events, so they set the rules for what runs at the Olympics. And this question has been pushed several times. In 2021, the Norwegian Archery Association asked about the legality of thumb rings, in which it was ruled that thumb rings are considered to be release aids, and release aids can only be used in compound. Therefore, if you shoot with a thumb ring, your Asiatic bow would have to compete in the compound division. And this caused a bit of a stir because the wording of this clarification would seem to imply that World Archery has no interest in this kind of archery. This was further clarified in 2024 when an Archery Australia representative forwarded a similar question on the use of the thumb in any event. So it was further clarified that the thumb is legal in shooting. So you can use fingers, you can use thumb in the bare bow, recurve, and compound divisions. And of course, with compound, nobody shoots with fingers. Virtually everyone shoots with release aid, but it is legal to shoot with fingers. With recurve, there's no rule saying you can't use a thumb. So recurve and bare bow, you can shoot with fingers or with thumb. The clarification does stipulate you can use a soft tape, which doesn't make the thumb stiff or rigid, but you can't use a thumb ring, which again is reclarified to be considered a release aid, which only can be used in a compound division. So once again, the rules I think are fairly clear. You can't use the thumb ring, which more or less stops the use of thumb draw or Asiatic thumb style shooting in a modern target competition in these divisions. There are traditional divisions, at least for the field or 3D rule sets, where you can use fingers or thumb, but it specifies you must make contact with the string and you can't use the thumb ring again. So technically you can use a thumb draw and Asiatic in some events, but you are joining in a different division, not your own division. The reaction tends to come very hostile or vitriolic, like how dare World Archery not represent all archery in the world? How dare they define what archery is or isn't? How could this not be considered traditional archery, and so on? And I get some of the reaction, but I feel this really is a source of confusion and a misunderstanding of what World Archery is and how archery is organized around the world. And to me, my reaction to this, when people say, oh, we must use thumb rings, we must be able to use Asiatic draws and traditional techniques, the Olympics should include this and that. To me, my reaction is, sir, this is a Wendy's. And for those that don't understand the meme, it means that you're trying to demand something from a location or an organization or a person which they don't provide. You've come to the wrong place. And I'm going to throw the question back at people who are advocating for the growth of traditional archery. And I'm saying this because I shoot both. I shoot both Asiatic, traditional, recurve, not compound. But like I get it. We want to see more events. But are you asking the right people? Like, do you really want these organizations to take your archery? And this is a very, very poignant question because people are very passionate about protecting their kind of archery. But you're asking an organization which doesn't run your archery to take it over. Is that really what you want? So one of the core misunderstandings I feel is the universal use of the word archery to describe all sports using a bow and arrow, and that is a very correct and literal definition. But the different styles of archery you see, from modern target archery to traditional horseback archery or foot archery, they are in effect entirely different sports that share some common things, equipment and history and so on, but they are very much different sports. And the equivalent to this, I would say, is football. And to my international audience, you will ask, well, which football? That is exactly the point. The parallels between archery and the split today between different archery styles is very similar to how football evolved. I mean, every culture had some kind of sport which involved a ball-shaped object and kicking around or running around in some way. The modern sport of football, which we would call soccer in many places, or association football, originates in England, but it wasn't the idea of one person to make this game called football or association football or soccer. It was a combination of different kinds of football played in different areas, from Eton to rugby to London. Different kind of groups kind of came together to make an agreed rule set, which became the starting point for the modern sport of football today. Now, of course, it diverges. Different regions, different countries made their own rules based on a combination of what worked for them, what they preferred, cultural norms, and so on. So again, we have rugby. That was a big division from what is now called association football. And even a rugby split, rugby league, rugby union. You have Gaelic football, Australian rules football, American football, Canadian football, and they're all very different sports, but they all share the word football. And today we understand that there's no confusion between someone playing soccer, someone playing American football, and someone playing Gaelic football. They're all very, very different. But you kind of don't see people trying to force, rugby league rules into soccer or soccer rules into Canadian football. Like, they're just different sports with different audiences, different players, different appeals. So that's the situation with football. So can you imagine, US soccer to go to FIFA and say, look, in our country, we have a lot of people playing American football. A lot of them want to compete on the same fields and events as our soccer teams. So can we allow them to use their hands to pick up the ball? And that is obviously no, we don't do that here. Or can you imagine like an American expat come to Australia, say, look, I want to play rugby, but I'm used to playing American football. Can I throw the ball forward? And also, of course, we don't do that here, so no. But as far as rules go, because it is a rule set, you have to explain the justification and rationale within a rule set. You can't just say, oh no, we don't do that here, because that's just arbitrary. You've got to justify it basically like a legal case, like on what basis can you not do this? And that's why you see the wording from World Archery saying, well, in these divisions, which aren't Asiatic, recurve, barebow, and compound, you can't use this or you can use this, because they're explaining a rule clarification in their rule set to justify exactly why it can or can't be used. Not by gut feeling of, oh, generally good enough. It has to be very specific. But the cultural clash here is that you see people who are trying to put in a rule set in a sport which didn't have that rule set to begin with. That's the origin and lineage of modern archery. And that's kind of the lineage of modern sport archery. The most popular version of the sport has the lineage that comes from Western Europe, from France, Belgium, from England, of course, popularized by the USA. That was the rule set which evolved to become modern archery today. So when we see archery at the Olympics, that's the modern version which we use. It is not meant to encompass every single kind of archery. In the same way where sports, again, like football, can't cover every single style of football under one umbrella. Boxing can't cover every single martial art, from kickboxing to Muay Thai, under one competitive umbrella. You can't have the International Fencing Federation, so the FIE. They can't include like katana or like HEMA into the same events, just because they don't want to. But you really really want to. Like, you want to see like guys with katana or long swords in the competition. That's great, but in their own competition, not fighting against foil and epee and saber. They're just very, very, very different sports with different origins. So that's why whenever I see this, controversy or the reactions to rule clarifications saying you can't do this, it would kind of be like me taking my Olympic recurve and going to a traditional club and saying, all right, can I include this bow in your event? I mean, I can't really be outraged if I'm not allowed to shoot Olympic recurve in a traditional event. That's kind of what's being asked the other way when traditional shooters want to be included in a modern event. And I'm going to segue to the real question is, do you really want traditional events in modern organizations? And this is a pertinent question, because I get why people want to push for more inclusivity and more inclusion of traditional forms of archery in sporting clubs or in modern events. But here's the thing, okay? You are asking a club or organization or style of sport which doesn't have this form to now include it. I get that because for many people, we live in places where modern archery is more common, but you have that interest in traditional archery. And there's nothing stopping people, for the most part, from using traditional bows in a modern club. And if you're lucky, you might have someone there who knows how to teach it, how to interact with people who shoot thumb draw, shoot longbow. But that's a very, very niche interest. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with having a niche interest, but they can't really cater for you. They can provide a venue for you to practice and train, but they can't really change their rules to allow you to shoot a different style in your competition, because most clubs run the same rule set. They might have in-house rules, but for state events or national events or international events, they can't modify the rules to include a different style, which is outside of the sport. I'm drawing the lines clearly here. I'm saying it's not archery. It's a different sport of archery. Another big problem with trying to strong arm traditional events into a modern agenda or a modern program is you're not going to be happy with the way they do it. Right? So it might seem easy, right? I just want to shoot my horsebow or my thumb draw in a state championship, which isn't in the same sport. I just want to shoot there. Okay, all right, let's say hypothetically we do push through a rule set. Start from in-house, then might go towards state level or national level. It has happened. Again, the UK is a good example. They now have a thumb shooting division, but they're like the outlier. What about everybody else? Here's a big problem. There is no unified rule set for traditional archery. Right? You might think, it should be obvious. Oh yeah, just old-fashioned bows and old-fashioned techniques are fine. But at what point are things not okay? So there's already a massive divide within traditional community. There's no one global universal federation for traditional archery. There are some things like the International Horse Archery Association, which is specific to horse archery. There are governing bodies for like Kudo, so they run their own thing. But there's no single international traditional archery association because, again, so many styles exist and they're so different. There aren't any regional bodies, there aren't any international bodies, so there's no single agreed rule set. Even the IHAA, International Horse Archery Association, has a compromise rule set which incorporates some common things within Horse Archery Federation rules and tradition, but it's a kind of an arbitrary rule set, which is a compromise. Traditional archery will have to face the same thing. What targets do you shoot? What distances? What rounds? What techniques are allowed? What bows are allowed? What materials are allowed? I'm going to go on a tangent and talk about a more recent organisation in Australia. So in Australia, we have several divisions. We have Archery Australia, which is the main sporting body federation, which is affiliated with World Archery. We have the ABA, which is the Australian Bow Hunters Association, which is for bow hunting, obviously. We have 3D AAA, which is for 3D archery. So already 3 different archery divisions. And more recently, we have the TAA, which is the traditional Archers Association, and they exist to promote the growth of traditional archery. But the original mindset or the origins of TAA was for longbow shooting. And again, what kind of longbow? A more like American longbow, not English longbow. So when they run their events, they have a lot of divisions. So TAA, when you go, you have the modern recurve, for people who shoot recurve, you can do that. You have barebow, you have traditional, which is a very loaded term in itself. Then you have primitive or historical. Then you have Asiatic, I think it's the division. So you do have an Asiatic recurve by itself. And then you have hybrid. And all these have very specific rules. And one of the problems I covered within the traditional problem video is that the rules are kind of stuck in an arbitrary point in time, where the rules are frozen based on what's currently used. The sport of traditional archery hasn't gone so competitive where it's modernized. It kind of has to an extent. So bows today, most people use bows which are made from modern composite materials, namely fiberglass, which is not a traditional material. And people are usually okay with that. But then you go towards carbon arrows, you go, no, we don't do carbon arrows. It has to be wood. Or it might be aluminium if you're going towards Western traditional. It's a weird kind of like, retrospective. But carbon arrows are so much easier to find, so much easier to use and cheaper to replace compared to wooden arrows. But does a comp disallow that? Some do, some don't. Some make their own division where you can use carbon arrows, but you can't compare against wooden arrows. It's such a big split and a big disadvantage if you combine them together that it just doesn't really work out. Now I'm rambling in circles here, but the point is that it is a kind of a rambly circular fragmentation. You don't have an agreed rule set. So if traditional archers can't agree on their own rules, what makes you think that you can ask World Archery, which doesn't do any of these sports, to make their own rule set? Because you can guarantee they'll pick some, if they do, if any association, whether it's club or state or World Archery, if they bring in traditional archery, they're going to make their own rules and no one's going to be happy, all right? It's there, but there'll be all these like branch offs and all that, which people will go, nah, this isn't what we wanted. Well, you asked for it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from here, right? So it's not the issue which you think it is. There's no attempt by World Archery to stamp out traditional archery. They're not being racist or culturally appropriating things or conquering, colonizing things. It is a style of archery which evolved on its own, and it's the only style that's modernized and remains relevant, at least in the archery competitive circles. Traditional archery events are mostly localized in countries where it still is a major pursuit. But it's kind of hard to make headway when you're in a different country where most people don't practice it. Is it possible to make headway? The answer is yes. It's definitely possible to have more, cross collaboration, more communication, expose people to more of these things. But you have to appreciate these are really separate things. It's equally hard to get someone who is shooting traditional or horsebow to come try Olympic archery. Back when I was starting Olympic archery, there was an invitation to come and try for Kudo. And 3 people turned up from all Victoria or something. So there's not that much interest in learning a completely different style. You might learn variations in your own style, but it's kind of hard to cross over. Not many people, or I should say the majority of people, will pick the thing they like the most. They might shoot maybe compound and recurve, or recurve and barebow, or recurve and trad. But the majority of people will only dedicate themselves to one particular style. And for that reason, you won't see much impetus for change. For the modern shooter today, it may be a matter of convenience, where they want to be allowed to share the same venues, the same clubs and ranges as modern archery. I think many places are completely fine that you shoot traditional in an environment where most people shoot compound or recurve. But the events there may not cater for you. Is it a shame? It kind of is. You want to use your bow to compete in the same events, but these events run to a different rule set to what you are using. And that's the circle that we're going around here. I think there can be room for change. I think a club might start the process by allowing more kind of cross events, but I don't think there's going to be much room to include a whole different division, which, as we said, isn't the original sport which the modern form grew from. And I think it might be more beneficial to organize more centralized versions of traditional archery to have agreed events and rule sets. So that's my take. A bit of a hot take, I think. I mean, like I said, I shoot both styles. I love both styles. But I can also see organizationally why an organization like World Archery or any national association will draw a line between thumb draw and their kind of archery, or why they will define the rules in a very technical way, which seems like they don't know what traditional archery is. Again, it's this is the Wendy's, right? You're kind of asking the wrong club or the wrong sport to make a rule set for your version of the sport. And unfortunately, there isn't that many traditional events specifically for things like thumb shooting in many Western countries. You find instead a lot of countries like Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia, Indonesia have far bigger representation and more events for traditional archery. They maintain that tradition much more. But if you're in a place like America or a place like Australia, it's very localized to certain pockets where there are some communities, but not much in terms of organizing events. So yeah, it's a strange place we live in, or time we live in, where there is a resurgence, but we haven't had that support from a grassroots level and definitely not from a governmental level. And it has to start from somewhere. So if it is something that you do want to see more of, really encourage you to think about how you can bring your skill set to help like local clubs or schools to encourage and endorse it, have more people do the sport, which brings in more manpower, more skill sets, and that might bring together more people of like mind with similar styles with the same goal. It may be harder to approach a club that already exists to try to use them because they've already set their rules and member base. But it's something which you can be optimistic about. I think there's some positive changes happening, but I really think that any negative reaction over rules and what's not allowed isn't very constructive. So that's my take on the issue. I don't really think that traditional archery needs to meld with modern archery to succeed. I actually think traditional archery is better off growing on its own. I think there's so much more to traditional archery which people can only appreciate if they spend time doing it and with people doing the same sort of thing. I think that's why, when I see growth of, Australian clubs like Maidan or Archery Ascension, it's nice seeing them get more organized, teach more people, immerse more people in that kind of archery. But I also work on both sides, where I work in a modern club as well. And again, it's hard to cross over because you've chosen the archery that you want to do. And it may not be beneficial to try to include both in the same place. There are logistical reasons, organizational reasons, but also, like I said, I don't think modern archery can do justice to traditional archery. It's such a thing on its own that it needs to stand out on its own. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Post your thoughts below. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time.